I'm Rubina Margosian, and this is the Week in Review. This week in the news, what the Washington Accords promised to bring to the South Caucasus. Family of billionaire Samvel Karapetyan launches a $500 million investment arbitration against Armenia. And as the Nubarashen landfill burns, the Yerevan Municipality announces plans for Armenia's first waste recycling plant. Tune into our weekly roundup of the news with me, Rubina Margosian. Last week in Washington, D.C., at the invitation of President Donald Trump, Armenia's Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan and Azerbaijani President Ilham Aliyev formally launched a landmark normalization process, the centerpiece, the draft agreement on the establishment of peace and interstate relations, a 17-article treaty that had been finalized back in March by Armenia and Azerbaijan. The key provisions of the draft treaty include mutual recognition of sovereignty, territorial integrity, and political independence within Soviet-era borders with no future territorial claims, a mutual commitment to refrain from using or threatening force and to prevent third-party aggression, no interference in domestic affairs, diplomatic relations to commence post-ratification overseen by a bilateral commission, all disputes to be resolved through direct consultation, a shared pledge to delimit and demarcate borders explicitly prohibiting foreign military bases along their boundaries, joint commitments to address issues such as missing persons, forced disappearances, hate crime, separatism, extremism, and terrorism, a requirement to settle all existing interstate claims and disputes in any court within 1 month of the treaty's entry into force. Contrary to previous drafts, the initiated treaty omits transport clauses, which were addressed separately in the trilateral declaration signed the same day. This statement inaugurates the Trump route for international peace and prosperity, this is abbreviated as TRIP, an unimpeded transit corridor linking mainland Azerbaijan to Nakhichevan via Armenian territory. TRIP guarantees reciprocal connectivity benefits for Armenia, but more crucially, the route will operate under full Armenian sovereignty, territorial integrity, and legal jurisdiction. Though the declaration sets no timetable, President Trump announced that Armenia will enter an exclusive partnership with the United States to develop and manage the corridor potentially for up to 99 years. In Washington, Pashinyan and Aliyev also agreed on the dissolution of the OSCE Minsk Group, one of the preconditions set by Baku. Earlier this week, the Armenian Foreign Ministry announced that a joint letter and a draft of the proposed decision regarding the OSCE Minsk Group process and the dissolution of its related structures had been circulated to OSCE participating states. France has expressed support for the joint call to dissolve the Minsk Group, viewing it as a step towards the signing and ratification of the Armenia-Azerbaijan Peace Treaty. The Minsk Group was established in 1992 during the First Nagorno-Karabakh War, and it had been spearheading efforts to find a peaceful solution to the Nagorno-Karabakh conflict and was co-chaired by France, Russia, and the United States. Meanwhile, Baku continues to stress that Armenia must amend its constitution before the final signing of the peace treaty. Azerbaijan's Special Envoy Elchin Amirbekov stated that additional steps are required for the document's final signing and ratification, with Baku expecting changes to remove the territorial claims that Armenia still maintains against Azerbaijan. President Aliyev expressed confidence in Washington that Armenia will address these constitutional provisions during the ongoing constitutional reform process. And in Washington, President Trump held separate meetings with Armenian Prime Minister Pashinyan and Azerbaijani President Aliyev. Pashinyan and Trump signed 3 memoranda of understanding, one on developing Armenia's role in the Crossroads of Peace transport project, one on cooperation in artificial intelligence and semiconductors, and a third one on energy security. Armenian Foreign Minister Arat Mirzoyan said that the energy deal will help stabilize and modernize Armenia's energy system, attract private investment, and expand civilian nuclear cooperation. It also includes regional energy partnerships and training programs to boost self-sufficiency. The Crossroads of Peace agreement reflects U.S. support for Armenia's sovereignty, territorial integrity, and internationally recognized borders. It aims to improve infrastructure, border security, customs management, and encourage private investment in Armenia's role as a regional transit hub. And the AI and semiconductor memorandum is designed to grow Armenia's high-tech sector, build its semiconductor ecosystem, expand AI applications, and promote workforce training through academic and public-private partnerships, all within the framework of U.S. export controls. Well, Trump also signed a memorandum of understanding with Azerbaijan's president aimed at elevating bilateral relations to a strategic level. The memorandum sets the stage for the creation of a strategic working group tasked with developing a charter on strategic partnership between Azerbaijan and the U.S. within the next 6 months. This development follows a similar move in January when Armenia and the United States signed a strategic partnership document. In addition to the memorandum, Trump signed an executive order extending the waiver of Section 907 of the Freedom Support Act, maintaining the legal flexibility that allows U.S. aid to flow to Azerbaijan. The text of the executive order waiving Section 907 has been published. It explicitly states that it will not undermine ongoing efforts to negotiate a peace settlement between Armenia and Azerbaijan and not be used for offensive purposes against Armenia. The visit to Washington also included a corporate-level agreement in the presence of both presidents. Azerbaijan's state oil company, SOCAR, and ExxonMobil signed a memorandum of cooperation. Also, since the Washington meeting, numerous countries and international organizations have welcomed the initiative, including regional neighbors. In Moscow, Foreign Ministry spokesperson Maria Zakharova called the meeting a positive step for advancing peace, noting Russia's interest in a stable South Caucasus. She did take the time to note that the Armenia-Azerbaijani normalization process began with Russia's mediation in the November 9, 2020 trilateral statement and the deployment of Russian peacekeepers. Zakharova stressed that reconciliation must balance both countries' interests, be shaped by regional players, and avoid new dividing lines from outside actors. She also underscored the continued relevance of existing trilateral agreements on unblocking communications, Armenia's EAEU commitments, and Russia's role in guarding Armenia's border with Iran. While Russian Deputy Prime Minister Alexei Uverchuk, who also co-chairs the Trilateral Working Group on Opening Regional Communications, said Moscow will discuss the unblocking of regional routes with Baku next week and will also visit Yerevan to review Armenia's EAEU obligations. He noted that the Trilateral Working Group tasked with opening regional communications remains active. However, side note, the working group has not met since June of 2023 when the meeting happened in Moscow. Meanwhile, Prime Minister Pashinyan has skipped the August 15 EAEU Intergovernmental Council meeting in Kyrgyzstan, with his office citing a short vacation from August 12th until the 15th, and Deputy Prime Minister Mihai Grigoryan has attended in his place. Iran has sent mixed signals about the Armenia-Azerbaijan agreements reached in Washington, but largely appears to accept them. Its foreign ministry welcomed the deal as a step towards lasting stability while warning against foreign intervention near its borders. President Pezeshkian said Iran's main demands, preserving territorial integrity, maintaining European connections, and ensuring northern links, had been met, though he noted concern over the road being built by an American and Armenian company. Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan briefed Pezeshkian by phone, assuring that no agreement will be signed without fully considering Iran's interests. Deputy Foreign Minister Vahan Kostanyan then traveled to Tehran, emphasizing that trip aligns with Iran's interests and could boost Armenia-Iran rail links to the Black Sea and will involve no U.S. security presence. Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi confirmed Armenia has addressed Iran's red lines and that security would remain Armenia's responsibility, although Tehran will remain vigilant. Pashinyan told Fox News later on that the route would benefit both Iran and Russia, connecting the Persian Gulf to the Black Sea while also enabling a direct railway link between Iran and Russia. Turkey's foreign ministry welcomed the progress made towards establishing a lasting peace between Azerbaijan and Armenia, noting that at a time of intensifying international conflicts and crisis, this development holds a particular significance, and Turkey will continue to contribute to efforts aimed at the full fruition of this opportunity. Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan also briefed Turkish President Recep Erdogan on the meeting. The two leaders discussed issues on the Armenia-Turkey bilateral agenda, including the technical implementation of already reached agreements. Pashinyan noted that conditions for implementing these agreements are more favorable now than ever before. Both sides agreed to continue active political dialogue. The former ministers of Armenia and Azerbaijan talked over the phone since the meeting. They discussed the implementation of the joint accord signed in Washington, as well as confidence-building measures. Arat Mirzoyan and Ceyhun Bayramov also reaffirmed their readiness to continue direct dialogue. The Armenian opposition also weighed in on the agreements reached in Washington. The Armenia Alliance criticized them, saying they bear no relation to a genuine peace and instead introduce new existential threats to Armenia and the Armenian people. The documents attempt to legitimize Azerbaijan's ethnic cleansing and genocidal policies against the people of Artsakh, they said, including the removal of the Artsakh issue from the international agenda after the Minsk group's dissolution and the occupation of Armenian sovereign territory. Tigran Abrahamian from the I Have Honor Alliance said the draft peace agreement would serve as a tombstone over the rights of those forcibly displaced from Artsakh. He added that the statements and the draft agreement reflect Azerbaijan's priorities, Turkey's ambitions, and the advances of various Western countries over Russia in the regional balance, while Armenia itself is largely absent from the document. And former Yerevan Mayor Hayk Marutyan's new political party, said the results of the Washington meeting should be assessed realistically without undue alarmism or excessive enthusiasm. Given the circumstances, it would have been difficult to imagine a more favorable outcome than what was achieved with the participation of Western partners, the statement said. In the medium term, the agreements provide an opportunity to avoid a new war and pursue economic development. It emphasized that they provide only an opportunity, no guarantees. And in Armenia, some criticized last week's joint Washington declaration for not mentioning Armenian prisoners of war and detainees still held in Azerbaijan. Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan's spokesperson said the issue was raised directly with President Trump during the meeting. At the meeting, Trump referred to 23 Christians held in Baku, sparking speculation and a list circulating online. It turned out the list came from an American pastor, Joel Tenney, based on accounts from families of people missing after the September 2023 fuel deposit explosion in Stepanakert. Those families suspect some of their loved ones may be in Azerbaijani captivity and have provided evidence to Armenian authorities. Well, according to former Artsakh State Minister Artak Beklarian, there are currently 23 confirmed Armenian detainees in Baku, 6 civilians, 9 POWs, and 8 political prisoners. 7 have already been sentenced to 15 to 20 years. The rest remain on trial. And speaking of which, the trial of former Artsakh officials continues in Baku. Ruben Vartanian and his lawyer have again raised concerns about the proceedings. On August 12, Vartanian's Baku-based lawyer, Avram Berman, requested a forensic linguistic examination citing inconsistencies in the Russian translation of the indictment. Berman then challenged the panel of judges. Both motions were dismissed, with the court noting similar objections had been made previously without new grounds. And the third iteration of Eagle Partner 2025, a joint Armenia-U.S. military exercise, began this week in Armenia and will continue until August 20. Service members from the Armenian Armed Forces, the U.S., Europe and Africa, and the Kansas National Guard are participating. The exercises aim to enhance interoperability for international peacekeeping missions, exchange best practices in command and communication, and to improve the readiness of Armenia's peacekeeping unit. Activities include preparation and execution of peacekeeping operations with a particular focus on medical evacuation. And in local news, the family of billionaire Samvel Karapetyan has launched a $500 million investment arbitration against Armenia over the nationalization of the electric networks of Armenia. Karapetyan was detained in June on charges of publicly calling for the government's overthrow and placed in pre-trial detention. Soon after, Parliament passed a bill enabling the electric networks nationalization, and the government appointed Romanos Petrosyan, a former governor of Godaic Ministry of Environment and once the head of the State Supervisory Services of Armenia, as interim manager. The Karapetyan family says they tried to negotiate under the Armenia-Cyprus bilateral investment treaty, but the government refused. They turned to the Stockholm Chamber of Commerce for emergency arbitration, which in July ordered Armenia to refrain from new laws or actions affecting the electrical networks, a ruling reaffirmed in August. Authorities have publicly rejected the decision's binding nature and continued management changes in the company, including executive dismissals. The family claims Armenia's actions amount to unlawful expropriation under the treaty and is seeking damages, past and future, currently estimated at $500 million. And renowned international lawyer Robert Amsterdam has joined the legal team defending Samvel Karapetyan. He is currently in Armenia, awaiting approval from the Armenian Bar Association to participate in court hearings. Amsterdam described Karapetyan's detention as unlawful and politically motivated, noting that the businessman is being held in poor conditions in violation of the law. He characterized the pretrial detention as unreasonable and inconsistent with the norms of a Western-style judicial system. The lawyer stated that his mission in Armenia is to defend the church and individuals he considers unlawfully detained. He expressed concern over attempts by some governments to use the church for political purposes. Now, on the side, we don't know that there's a case between the church and the state in particular, or if he's really representing the church or just Karapetyan. That remains unclear. Well, Robert Amsterdam is a Canadian-American lawyer known for handling high-profile international cases. He represented political leaders, multinational corporations, and governments in politically sensitive matters. And a court in Yerevan this morning extended Karapetyan's pretrial detention by 2 months. His defense team plans to appeal the decision. This decision came after a court of cassation ruled that Karapetyan's initial detention was unlawful, but the prosecutor general's office responded saying the detention was lawful. Now his legal team again plans to file an appeal with the court of cassation. This is an ongoing story and we will continue to follow it. And in related news, Karapetyan's nephew, who occasionally publishes messages on his uncle's behalf, released another statement from the Russian Armenian businessman on social media announcing that his Our Way movement will soon be presented to the public. According to him, the initiative has been formed around clear principles and has ambitious plans, for Armenia, which include developing the economy, creating real opportunities for businesses and wealth creation, strengthening family and national values, restoring Armenia's reputation as a reliable partner, ensuring the right of Artsakh residents to live with dignity, restoring young people's faith in the future by developing the education system, preserving and protecting the Holy Church. Karapetyan said the Our Way movement will serve as the foundation for a new political force that, in his view, the country urgently needs today. Also this week, the Armenian prosecutor's office has opened a criminal investigation into allegations that Indian employees at a sewing factory in the town of Yerevan were subjected to physical and psychological coercion, including threats with a firearm. No arrests have been made yet. The case comes after several days of strikes by workers at the Russian-owned IG Grant textile loft factory. The employees say they have gone without pay for 3 months and accused the factory's director of threatening them with a pistol. The workers said they wanted their wages and means to return to India. India's ambassador in Armenia visited the factory to meet with the workers and hear their complaints. She also met with the factory's management. And more in legal news, Armenia's Prosecutor General's office has filed a claim with the country's anti-corruption court seeking to recover 670 million Armenian drams. This is about 1.7 million Armenian dollars from 4 former top officials involved in the March 1st case. The sum represents the compensation the government paid back in 2019 from the state budget to those affected during the March 1 crackdown. The lawsuit names former President Robert Kocharian, former Deputy Prime Minister Armen Gevorkyan, former Defense Minister Seyran Ohanyan, and former Chief of the General Staff Yuri Khachaturov, holding them jointly and individually liable for the funds. And over the weekend, a fire broke out at the Nubarashen landfill. This is near Yerevan. Administratively in Yerevan, the municipality reported that after the fire was extinguished, the fire went on for several days. After the fire was extinguished, the municipality reported that it's working with the Ministry of Internal Affairs Rescue Service to implement preventative measures. Following the incident, the Yerevan municipality also announced plans to build Armenia's first waste recycling plant to replace the Nubarashen landfill. The project will be carried out as a public-private partnership with 2 stages of the tender process already completed to select the contractor. And Armenia's Minister of Territorial Administration and Infrastructure, David Khudatyan, announced this week that Gyumri's Shirak Airport will soon offer flights to Europe. He added that an agreement is already in place with one airline and flights are expected to begin in the near future. Now, we don't have any information about the destination, about which airline, and how near is the near future, but it's good news. And Armenian citizens can now travel to Oman without a visa. This is another good news. And that's all for this week. It has definitely been a long week with us being on a vacation at a very unfortunate time when it comes to the news flow. But as usual, a little bit about what we've published in the last week. On Friday, we published the latest security report by Nerses Kopalian. It's called Pax Americana Comes to the South Caucasus. Maria Titizian also did a podcast with Nerses Kopalian. You can both read the security report, which has a lot of detailed information about what happened in Washington, and also listen to the podcast. This week, we also published a column by Olesya Vartanyan. It's called Beyond the Ceremony, the Real Test for Armenia-Azerbaijan Relations. And in the same vein, a piece by David Petrosyan. It's called What Does Armenia Stand to Gain? Musings on the Washington Signings. This is the little bit of the Washington block that we've published recently, and we will continue to publish more articles in the coming days about and around the Washington signing. But this week we've also had some arts and culture pieces. I Have a Vision, Let the River Unite is an opinion piece by Nairi Khachaturian. She's an art curator and art historian, and she talks about this vision of having a contemporary art center that is on the banks of the Arax River and combines Armenia and Iran through curatorial languages and modern art. We have a piece by Christopher Atamian, Tia Fahradian's Tattoos and Other Markings. He usually speaks about Armenian artists or artists of Armenian origin who are working outside of Armenia and who've made a name for themselves. And this time he's talking about a violinist and experimental composer. Very interesting how she brings together here her experimental nature of her art with very heavy and historical topics. He talks about her album Tattoos and Other Markings. And as usual, once a month we have a new installment from Sheila Pailam for her Unleashed column. This time it's called Boxes and Labels, and it is about human nature of wanting to fit into boxes and yet how it is unnecessary and unconstructive. And last but not least, a new podcast that we launched recently. It's called Up Close and Personal, and this time it's with Cengiz Aktar. Maria Titizian sat down with the political scientist, economist, and author Cengiz Aktar, and they spoke about Turkey's politics, fractured memory, the weight of denial. He says for him, confronting the truth of the Armenian genocide is not only a moral necessity, but the key to breaking the nation's cycle of repression. And that's all for this week. We will be back again next week.